Because Ellen's updating. She's gonna let everybody in at 12, and then we're gonna get started. Okay. I just got it.
Oh, originally, yeah.
Very educational.
All right, it's just about noon, so we're gonna go ahead and get started in just a moment. We're gonna let everybody in through the Zoom. So you might see our presenter, Dr. Pizarro, looking up here. That's because our Zoom audience is participating through cybersphere. So I know most of y'all. My name is Brooke. I am one of our program coordinators here at Alzheimer's Services. I appreciate y'all joining us today for another ADAPT series. We have one more ADAPT presentation this year that's going to be in November. So I hope y'all join us again for that one. I will be sending a follow-up email after this presentation, which will include a link to an evaluation. For those that are in person, you have a paper evaluation, but anybody that is needing a CEU who is attending virtually, you'll fill out your evaluation through that link that I'll email you. And once you send me your evaluation, that is how you will receive your CEU certificate. For some housekeeping for today's presentation, everybody who is attending virtually will remain muted throughout the whole program. It is recorded. And if you do have a question throughout the presentation, just put it in the chat box and we'll read those out at the end of the presentation. Also, for anybody that's needing a CEU certificate, make sure your display name is both your first and last name. That just helps us make sure that we record your participation. Okay, that's all the housekeeping for today. Our presenter today is Dr. Eliana Pizarro. We're very excited to have her. This is my first time I've ever attended a presentation by a behavioral analyst, and so I'm very interested to hear her expertise. She earned her doctorate in behavioral analysis from the University of Florida, which we won't hold against her, under the mentorship of Dr. Tim Bulmer. I'm sure you could And she obtained her master's degree from the University of Maryland at Baltimore County. She trained at the Kennedy Krieger Institute, a premier world-class rehabilitation hospital in Maryland. Dr. Pizarro has worked in the field for over 12 years in various capacities. She has serviced both pediatric and adult populations in clinics, homes, schools, and inpatient settings. Currently, she serves as a behavioral health consultant for individuals with neurocognitive disorders, including traumatic brain injury and dementia. Beyond her clinical responsibilities, Dr. Pizarro has served as an adjunct professor and a practicum supervisor for FRAMU and LSU, respectively. She has published several peer-reviewed papers, serves as a reviewer for Behavior-Analytic journal, and serves on the board of directors for 2 local nonprofits geared towards serving underrepresented communities. So I think we know she is good to talk on this topic. I'm very excited to have Dr. Pizarro here with us today. I'm gonna pass the floor over to her.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Brooke. Oh my goodness, no, thank you. Thank you guys for having me here today. I really appreciate it. And I will say, to reiterate, as Brooke said, my name is Dr. Pizarro. Everyone does call me Dr. P, so if that is your preference, please feel free. I answer to Dr. P. Okay, so as we know today, we are talking about behavior analytic interventions for persons with dementia, understanding and managing the underlying needs behind these behavioral expressions, okay? So, as Brooke said, I know I'm the one here speaking to you all today, but I'm starting with a question for you, okay? I want to know, what do you all think is the primary reason that we make the difficult decision to move our loved ones into either an assisted living or some skilled facility of some sort? What do y'all think is the primary reason? Thought?
Our inability to do it ourselves.
Yes. Yes. I know someone over here too.
Safety, that's what I was gonna say the same.
Yes. Yes. So it's reported that the #1 reason that individuals make this difficult decision is due to caregiver burnout. Okay. And caregiver burnout, yes, in line, you can't do it yourself, right? And the number one reported factor that they're responding to is due to these behavioral challenges. Yes, ma'am.
Can you turn the volume up for you?
Can we turn the volume up? I'm going to speak louder. I'm very sorry to everyone here, but I want to make sure that they can hear me. Okay, please let me know if y'all are still not able to hear me. And again, I do apologize to everyone in the room. I'm not shouting at you. Okay. Awesome, sounds great. Thank you, Kelly. Okay. Let's see if we can continue moving forward. I might be having difficulty now. Oh, okay. What do we know? I just gave it away. The primary intervention strategy for individuals struggling with dementia, the behavioral challenges that come along with it. What is the primary intervention strategy? My slide advanced quickly and it gave the answer. Pharmacological. Okay. Prescription drugs, as is the primary intervention strategy for this population. Now, it is critical for me to note here a few things. Number one, individuals with dementia are a vulnerable population, okay? They already have an at-risk central nervous system. They often have frequent comorbidities, are often on numerous prescription drugs for those comorbidities, right? Diabetes, hypertension, sounds familiar. And of course, age-related changes, okay, that are common for the majority of individuals with dementia. Now, all of these factors alter the pharmacodynamics of these drugs, yielding them to have minimal to no effect on the behavior changes they're intended to treat. Now, this is coupled with the fact that these drugs, unfortunately, carry some very adverse effects, right? This is noted by the FDA. We have seen black box warnings on the use of these drugs due to their significant risk of morbidity in this population, okay? They're also noted to induce the same symptoms for which they're trying to treat, okay? Depression-like symptoms, confusion, agitation, all things that they're intended to treat in the first place. These drugs often, unfortunately, have that same symptomology. Make sure that's not me. Now, unfortunately, this is not new information. Thank you. Yes, I do appreciate it. This is not new information. This article here is dated 2015. However, it has actually been mandated since the 80s that individualized behavior intervention is the first line intervention for individuals experiencing behavior challenges with dementia. Since the 80s. Okay, now you may wonder, why is this still the status quo? How can this be? And unfortunately, as noted by the Human Rights Watch in 2018, historically, the goal has been to produce docility. Okay, it is not to increase the happiness of our individuals with dementia. It is not to increase the well-being of our loved ones with dementia. It is not to increase the independence of our loved ones with dementia. It is to produce docility. Meaning it dampens all behavior, not just the behaviors of concern, the behaviors that we find problematic, but all behaviors, okay? Now, I'm not here to place blame on anyone because we do the best with what we got, right? But once you know better, you do better, that's right, yes. And so that is why we are here today. I want to tell you a better way. That is what we're speaking about. We are talking about taking an individualized behavioral approach, of which today I'm going to go through 4 steps to achieving that goal. The first being a thorough medical evaluation. Second, completing an individualized behavioral assessment. Third, developing an individualized behavior plan. And finally, fourth, implementation of that plan, continuous monitoring, and changes to the plan as necessary for the success of your loved one with dementia. Okay, we all with me? Yeah. All right, let's get started. Step 1. So it's imperative that the first step, our loved ones, if we see any behavioral challenges, it is imperative that we seek out a medical evaluation. Okay, what do I mean by that? You are going to go take your loved one with dementia to a primary care provider. Now, remember that it is your job as a caregiver to serve as an advocate for your loved one with dementia. Okay, during the progression of the disease, your loved one with dementia may not be able to effectively express what they're experiencing. Okay, so it's up to us as caregivers to serve as advocates to ensure that we receive the adequate evaluation steps. Yes, ma'am. Oh, so thank you for the prompt. Okay, in that medical evaluation, this is not an exhaustive list, but I'm going to go over some common things for which we want to ensure are adequately looked at in the context of this medical eval. First, signs of injury. This is common, okay? Maybe from an undetected injury, a fall, a compression fracture. These are common issues with this population that we need to explore. Drug side effects. Was there a recent medication change? Was there a change to an existing medication? Perhaps this individual is on a cocktail of medications, as we described for other medical issues, and certainly the interaction between those effects can cause behavior changes. This is something we need to explore. Are there signs of infection or from illness or other conditions? Okay, ear infection, sinus infection. There's a multitude of issues here that we need to make sure. Any other conditions, indigestion, arthritis. Okay, yes, urinary tract infection. Thank you. That is a very common one that produces delirium in individuals with dementia. It does. Okay, so if gone undetected, it can 100% cause behavioral challenges that we are seeing. Okay, and the last one, issues with hearing or vision. Of course, this is common, right, with advanced age. However, if gone uncorrected, issues with hearing or vision could absolutely cause feelings of frustration and isolation. Okay, so we want to ensure that we receive a comprehensive medical evaluation to address all of these potential concerns. Okay? Now, let's say that medical evaluation has been completed and all of the medical concerns have been addressed, and those problem behaviors dissipate. Well, guess what? You don't need to go any further, right? Solve the problem. You're done. You can stop. Now, if you address those medical concerns and either number one, the behavior challenges persist, or number two, all the medical concerns are ruled out, right? Medical providers determine that there is no underlying medical physiological reason that these behaviors are occurring. You're going to proceed to step 2, individualized behavioral assessment. Now, when we're completing a proper individualized behavioral assessment, there are many factors that we need to consider, okay? Biological. This includes illnesses, various medical conditions, as we discussed. It also includes the type of dementia. Is it vascular, frontotemporal, Lewy body, Alzheimer's? The stage of the dementia.
Maybe move the other
This
side.
side? Okay, I'm so sorry, some people, I'm trying. Okay, but thank you for the feedback. Physical. Are there physical factors that are contributing to these behavioral challenges? Okay, this can include, is our loved one receiving adequate sleep? Are they receiving appropriate amount of physical exertion? Okay, physical activity is incredibly critical to the success of our health. There's a lot of research on this topic, okay? We also have historical factors. So this includes who the individual is. What is their culture, their values, their ethics, their preferences, their dislikes, okay? Their faith. These are all critical variables that we need to consider when assessing the behavior of this individual. We have psychological factors. If my thing catches up, I do apologize. We're experiencing a little bit of technical issues, but work with me. I'm just going to keep going. Psychological factors. Look at that. Okay. We have fears, anxiety, depression, overwhelm. Of course, things we need to consider. And lastly, we have environmental factors. Okay. We're going to cover this by our W question. Who was around? What was going on? Where were we? When did this happen? Okay, these are variables that we would consider environmental. Now, you may have said to yourself earlier during the course of this presentation that maybe you have addressed behavior with a loved one with dementia or one that you serve in a professional capacity. Who would say that they have talked about behavior with a medical professional? Anyone? Maybe? Oh, not even. Okay, well, okay, maybe sometimes a little bit, right? Sometimes you go to an appointment, you leave with an ABS or after visit summary where they provide some general behavioral strategies that you can implement at home to help you and your loved one, right? Hopefully some of you have at least experienced that. However, this is where it gets tricky, okay? Now I'm going to talk about it through an example because that's I think what helps us learn. Let's say you leave with your ABS. This is a common issue that we find. And the first one on that list, it says, do not understimulate. Okay, got it? I can do that, right? It says, have music, have activities, have other people around, do things, right? Keep your individual cognitively and physically stimulated. Okay, sounds easy enough, right? Next bullet, don't overstimulate. Right? Reduce noise, reduce stimuli in the environment. It could be too overwhelming. Get rid of it. Now, that's very contradictory, right? That's directly contradictory points. When you try to use generic strategies, we are going to run into these problems, okay? Because what's something that we've learned earlier in this series? When you know one person with dementia, you know one person with dementia, right? So we cannot use a one-size-fits-all approach. It does not work. We need individualization, okay? Something to match the needs of their preferences, their values. That is where our individualized behavior assessment comes in, okay? So with that, I know I keep moving this way, I apologize. I want us all to become behavioral detectives today. It is time to investigate. So everyone here on Zoom, I want you to put your detective hats on and your magnifying glass out. I keep wanting to call it a microscope, so if I say the wrong word, please forgive me. All right, so those magnifying glasses are out. That's because at this moment, we're gonna zoom in on discrete instances of behavior. Okay, I'm gonna look really small right now. I'm not looking at the bigger picture. We're gonna zoom in to see and gather all of the tools and information that we can, okay? And we're gonna do that through looking at the building blocks of behavior, also known as the ABCs of behavior, okay? A for antecedent, B for behavior, and C for consequence. What does that mean? Antecedent means what was happening right before the behavior. B, what was the behavior itself? And C, what happened immediately following the behavior. I apologize for the craziness. All right, but now we're going to go into more detail of what each of these building blocks mean. And we are going to start with B. I know it's out of alphabetical order, but it will make sense. So, how we're going to start, I want everyone to imagine in their head a behavioral challenge that you have personal experience with a loved one with dementia, or one that you serve in a professional capacity, okay? You don't have to tell me what it is, but just think about it. Because as we go through each of these variables, it is going to be easier for you to apply it if you're envisioning a behavior that you have personal experience with, okay? So, I'm gonna give everyone just a second to think of their behavior. All right, got it? All right, so first thing we're going to consider when we try to identify what the behavior is we are going to strip away all labels. It is very common in our day-to-day language that we tend to label things, okay? She was combative. He's being rebellious. She's manipulative, right? All of those labels carry so much baggage inadvertently. But we all have implicit biases. It is critical that we strip away those labels and be explicit. What did they say? What did they do? Without adding a label to it, okay? Next factor we're going to consider is be precise. We are going to maintain objectivity and ensure what we're describing is measurable. Now, again, in an example, Mr. Jones was rude to me today. Why is this a problem? Well, because what's rude to you may not be rude to me, okay? My dad thinks that putting my elbows on the table is extremely rude. I think it's rude if you talk back to somebody, okay? We all have different ideas based on our histories, based on our backgrounds. We instead want to be explicit, say exactly what you mean, okay? Be precise. We want to include details. Remember, at this point, our microscopes are out. Magnifying glasses, they're out. We're looking close, we're zooming in. We're trying to gather all the information we can because we don't know what's going to be relevant later. We don't know what's going to lead us to a solution. So this is just some examples of details that we want to note. What is the body language of our loved one? Their facial orientation, where are they looking? Their facial expression, are they grimacing? Are they smiling? Are they laughing? Important things to consider. And last, we are going to avoid inferring intent, okay? Don't want to make any inferences. It may mislead or obscure us in the solution, okay? Remember, we are objective detectives. I don't want to try to infer meaning behind what's happening. Just tell me exactly what the behavior is or isn't, okay? All right. Now, the best way to learn is by you sitting there listening to me talk, right? No, it's by practicing. So we're going to practice. We're going to run one together. Okay, here's an example. He's anxious. Anyone have a loved one or someone they serve that suffers from anxiety? Pretty common. Okay, maybe yourself. Very real, right? Very real thing. Now, for our purposes here, we want to dig deeper. Because if we're going to get to the underlying cause of why he's anxious, we need to know more. We want to know the triggers. We want to know what's causing it. We want to know if there's something that makes it better, right? So we need to be explicit. He's anxious. How do you know he's anxious? Anyone have an idea? What's an example? There's no one correct answer.
His like nonverbal cues, like body language.
Okay. So what is he doing? What is that body language?
So if he's anxious, he might be a little tense. He might be a little self-isolating, not making eye contact.
Very good. If you couldn't hear online, tense, self-isolating, not making eye contact. Excellent. That's a perfect example. Good. So what I have up here in my example, he's pacing. He follows me around the house. That's when I know that he's feeling anxious. Okay? Good. Yes, it resonates. Good. All right. One more example. She's irritable. How might we know when someone is irritable? In your example, again, this will look different for everyone, but what's one example?
Really quick statement.
Yes, very good, being short. I think that's similar to what I have up here. She cuts me off and repeats no whenever I ask her to do something. Okay, that's how I know that Mrs. Smith is feeling irritable. Okay? So we get what I mean by this? We're going to strip away those labels and we're going to say exactly, objectively, what is the behavior that is happening. Awesome. All right, so now we are going to jump back and look at our antecedent, which is what happened before the behavior. All right? So here are some questions that we're going to ask ourselves to gather all of those clues. Remember, our magnifying glasses are still up. We're zoomed in, and we're trying to gather all the info we can. When did the behavior occur? Did it happen at a specific time of day? Maybe generally in the mornings when you first wake her up. Maybe every day at lunch. Okay? When is it happening? Does it happen before, after, or even during a certain activity, right? Maybe during the lunch meal every day, we reliably see that she's having problems. Is it a certain day of the week? Sometimes it happens. Okay, what day of the week is it? Maybe on Saturdays and Sundays, we tend to have more behavioral challenges than Monday through Friday. Okay, all important hints that could lead us to the solution. We're going to consider who was there or who wasn't. Okay, was there a lot of people around? Were they familiar, family, friends? Was there a lot going on? Was the person isolated? Were they off by themselves, off in the corner of the room? Important variables to consider. Where did it happen? Okay, were we in the dining room? Were we walking down the hallway? Setting, a little bit different, also important. Maybe the living room is generally pretty calm and quiet, but maybe this day there was a party going on, so it was very loud and chaotic. Okay, those are important setting details that we want to consider. And what was going on? What was the activity? Were they doing a puzzle? Were they playing a game? Was it during a medical appointment? Okay, we want to know what was happening in the moment before the behavior occurred. All right, so all of these things will help us generate our antecedent. Now we're going to move to consequence. Okay, so we had our behavior, went to our antecedent, now we're going to jump to the consequence. What happened after? Now, important to note, consequence does not mean good or bad, okay? It is simply the result of the behavior. First point of consideration, how did others respond? If people were around, how did they react? Okay, did they gasp? Did they come and offer help? What's wrong, Mr. Smith? I see you're frustrated. What can we do to help you? Did they transition activity? Maybe, okay, Mr. Smith, I see you're upset right now. Why don't we go do something else? Okay. Did they give a break? Maybe we were trying to brush Mr. Smith's hair and he become upset. So then, okay, you know what? I'm going to give you a break. We'll come back to brushing your hair later. Okay. How did others react? Now, we also want to consider if it didn't include the reaction of others at all. Did something just happen in and of itself? Okay. Did Mr. Smith, after the behavioral challenge, did it seem that he alleviated some sort of discomfort? Was there an increase in stimulation? Did we look more excited, more sad, more happy? These are all important things to consider within that consequence. And last point is just a reminder, the consequence is anything immediately following. Again, we're going to leave intent out of it, okay? He threw the remote across the room on purpose and broke it. We don't need intent. That is not relevant to our clue accrual here, okay? Because it will produce a mental blockade. The reason we leave intent and inferences out of this, it will create a mental blockade between the detectives and a plausible solution. Okay, we don't want to put up those walls. We don't want those barriers. We're going to maintain objectivity so that we can get to the solution. Don't add judgment. Okay, now you may be thinking to yourself, this is a whole lot of information, right, detectives? Okay, y'all, I just asked y'all to keep track of so much information. How are you going to do it? Through your ABC journals. So everyone, I believe online, this should have been emailed out to you. Everyone in the room, you have a printed copy. And here is how you are going to keep track of all of those clues that we're talking about, okay? Now, we're going to walk through this in an example that I have up here in just a moment, but keep in mind that this example is extremely condensed for space and time, okay? On your own journal, it's going to be much more detailed. You're going to have much more information to say, but for sake of this example, we're going to keep it brief, okay? So let's walk through together. My laser is not working, but I'm going to go left to right. All the way to the left, we have a start and stop time. We're going to indicate what time this behavior occurred, because as we said, that could be an important variable, okay? Now, if it was something discrete, meaning it was something brief, a yell, a throwing that remote across the room, you can just put the time. Whereas if it was something that was more ongoing, so for example, our friend that when he's anxious, he follows you around the house, we would indicate a start and stop time so that we know, was this going on for 5 minutes or 46 minutes, okay? That could be important information later. Next column, we have the caregiver. As we said, who was with them could be an important variable. Maybe our loved one with dementia just isn't hitting it off with this one person, and this could help absolve that later, okay? So we want to make sure we're indicating who was with them. The setting, the living room, remember making any additional notes. Was it loud? Was it quiet? Was it bright? Was it dark? Was it hot? Was it cold? Any other relevant variables that may be clues for us. Antecedent. In this instance, another resident approached my loved one with dementia and initiated a conversation. That was the antecedent. Behavior. My loved one with dementia yelled profanity at both the other resident and myself, the caregiver. Consequence, I just took them out of the room and took them outside, okay? We thought we just needed a change of scenery, so we decided, you know what, we're just gonna go somewhere else so that we avoid any further altercation, right? And the last column is just for any additional notes for which we think might be relevant. In this instance, I noted that it was a new resident. The resident that approached and initiated conversation was someone unfamiliar to my loved one with dementia. So that absolutely could be a potentially relevant variable, okay? So we have our journal. I have it organized such that each sheet will be a new day. Welcome to change as you wish. This is something you can print out multiple copies, bind it in a notebook, whatever suits your fancy. The point is that anytime that behavior occurs, you're gonna put it in as a new row, okay? So another instance of the behavior, you're gonna log it as on a new line, okay? And we're gonna track. We're gonna track for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. It all depends on how frequently that behavior occurs, okay? If it's something that occurs every day, 1 week is probably sufficient for you to gather lots of clues, okay? If it's something that occurs once a month, you're gonna have to track it a little bit longer so that you can gather all the clues you can, okay? Now, at this point, we are putting our magnifying glasses away, meaning we're going to zoom out. Up until this point, we've been looking really closely, gathering all the clues we can for these discrete instances of behavior. Now we're gonna zoom out and look at patterns, okay? It's not in the days, it's in the patterns. So I'm gonna throw up 3 consecutive days here onto the screen. I'll give y'all a minute, just go ahead and read through it. Again, for space sake, these are much more brief, A's, B's, and C's, but go ahead and look through those for just a minute. All right, so what are some patterns that we see here? Our A's at the top, okay, across these 3 consecutive days. I see that Mr. Smith is engaging in behavioral challenges primarily during low stimulation periods, right? He's on his own, not really too engaged across the 3 days. What about the behavior? I see that when he's upset, the behaviors, he tends to yell, curse, or slam his fist, okay? That's what I see consistently in following these periods of low stimulation. What about my C's on the bottom? I see that although in different forms, across all 3 instances, his caregiver interacted with him, right? Different types of interaction, but interaction nonetheless. Now, if you were not using an individualized behavioral approach in this situation, a couple things would have been very, very likely. Number 1, it would have been very easy for the caregiver to become upset in these situations, right? You disrespected me. That hurt my feelings. That's not how we speak to one another, right? Because we are applying intent. Second, it would have been very possible for us to respond inappropriately. What do I mean by that? It is a generic strategy that in these situations, maybe me as the caregiver, if I was not taking this individualized behavioral approach, but in these moments, maybe I responded by saying, you know what, I think you need a minute to calm down. I'm going to give you a minute. I'll go over here and let you calm down. And then when you're calm, I'll come back and talk to you again, right? That sounds familiar. What's the problem? We see that this is happening during periods of low stimulation without human contact. He's reliably getting human contact by engaging in these problematic behaviors. We all, as humans, innately desire human connection. In this instance, I would look at this and say, you know what? I think Mr. Smith is craving some human connection, okay? Some social interaction. By responding, by saying, you know what, I'm going to give him a minute, I'm going to just walk away, he seems upset right now, we are probably doing more harm than good, right? The underlying need behind these behaviors, we're not addressing. By responding to the behavior itself, we are ignoring Mr. Smith's underlying need of craving that human connection, okay? So, what I'm describing here is what we call a functional approach to understanding behavior, meaning that we are not looking at the behavior itself. We are looking at the underlying reason behind the behavior. So, I think this will all come together by walking through one more example, which I want to do here. Okay, I think this will help it all come together. We're going to use the example of wandering. Common topography of behavior with our loved ones with dementia, right? Hopefully familiar to all of us. So wandering, okay? Some might call it eloping, leaving the vicinity without your caretaker, okay? That they might just walk off and go somewhere. And that, of course, can be very dangerous, right? Very, very dangerous, absolutely. Now, what we're going to walk through is 3 different case studies of different individuals who all engaged in wandering. Okay, but we're going to use an individualized behavioral approach, and I'm just going to give you the end summary. The end summary meaning what was the underlying reason that we found to be the cause of the wandering. Okay, first we have Rob. Turns out Rob was a former golfer, so his wandering occurred simply as him continuing his daily regimen, what he would do every day, that physical exertion. He was trying to walk to the course, go shoot some, I don't know golf, I'm sorry, but shoot holes, I think. That was Rob. What about our next one? We have Maria. Turns out Maria had decreased English language skills. This is a common experience for bilingual individuals who develop dementia. Okay, they might revert back to their first language. In Maria's instance, her wandering was her trying to go to a local restaurant to speak to people who she could actually communicate with because they spoke her first language. So for her, wandering was her getting access to that human connection. Last, we have Andre. Turns out, Andre's wandering occurred reliably as a sign of his chronic pain. Pain that he no longer possessed the expressive language ability to share with others, to express to others what he was feeling. And he wandered to alleviate that pain. Okay, it helped alleviate some of that discomfort. So do we see, if we had treated wandering, if we had simply followed the generic best practice strategy for wandering, do you know what they are? They're always lock your doors and constant supervision. That is the go-to treatment. If they say your loved one is wandering, that's what you do. But guess what? We would have been ignoring the underlying need behind that wandering. If we had simply done that, we could have done a lot of harm to all 3 of the individuals we have here, okay? This is why we take an individualized behavioral approach. Now, hopefully I've convinced you so far. So we are going to move on to step 3, developing our behavior plan, okay? So we have our ABC journal filled. Time. I think we're good on time. We're gonna go through just a couple of examples here, okay, together. And let's go with Mr. Smith. Okay, so Mr. Smith, I'm going to summarize what we found through our ABC journal. This step would typically take a lot of analysis, but we are simply going to summarize here. Okay, we're going to go through common themes that we saw in that journal, and then some examples of individualized strategies that we might use in those scenarios. Okay, so Mr. Smith would engage in perseverative questions surrounding going home. When I say perseverative, I mean repeated. I want to go home. I want to go home. When is Susan picking me up? It's time to go home. I need to go home now. Okay? He also had decreased receptive language skills, meaning his ability to understand what others were saying to him had been deteriorated. We also found that perseverative questions increased during periods of low stimulation. Okay, independent leisure, down this, we would see higher rates of those perseverative questions. And last, we saw that unfavorable responses led to an increase in intensity. It escalated the situation, meaning that if we said, "You are hope," or no one is coming right now, maybe they'll come later, that immediately led to an escalation in the situation. So what are some examples of strategies that we might use in Mr. Smith's case? Implementation of a structured routine, okay, ensuring that we're including physical stimulation, mental stimulation, a sense of purpose, meeting Mr. Smith where he's at, irrespective of his current abilities, meeting him where he is right now, and embedding activities into his routine. Ideally, ones that are consistent with his preferences, okay? If Mr. Smith loved to cook, maybe he can't cook anymore, but what can he do? Can he stir a bowl? Can he put seasonings in? Whatever it is, we're going to meet Mr. Smith where he's at and add activities into his routine to that end. Because of Mr. Smith's decreased receptive language skills, we cannot just rely on what we say to him because he may not be able to interpret it. So what we're going to do is pair it with visual cues, meaning maybe gestures. It's time to brush your teeth. It's time to brush your hair. Okay, it can be a point. We're gonna come sit at the table. Okay, all of those visual cues. You can even use pictures. Okay, I've printed out pictures of people or places, something that you may not be able to point to, but you have a little book. Okay, it's imperative that we augment our speaking language with these visual cues due to Mr. Smith's receptive language ability. Okay. We're going to validate and extend his statements surrounding going home because we found that by negating his statements, it's going to escalate. He's going to become upset. You validate. Yes, Mr. Smith, it's time to go home. And you extend. What do you want to do when you get there? Do you want to cook dinner or do we have to do the laundry? Giving choices. Okay, open-ended questions are shown. There's a lot of research to demonstrate that they will lead to more confusion. Provide choices. They don't like your choices, provide different choices, okay? And we can track the trajectory so that we can focus on something else instead of going home in that moment. Let's go through another example. This will be our last one for sake of time. So here we're looking at Ms. Brown. Okay, Ms. Brown, common pattern that we saw, the primary behavioral challenge that was reported was she would continuously call for help. Okay, she lived in a skilled facility. Ms. Brown would continuously call out for her nursing staff, press the button for someone to come and help her. Okay, but what we found is that it was not consistent the type of help that she wanted. Okay. Open the curtains, it's too dark in here. Close the curtains, it's too bright. Turn up the volume, I can't hear. Turn it down, it's too loud. Okay, it was not consistent. We couldn't find a consistent pattern. And last point, we found that Ms. Brown had a negative response to physical touch. This is important. Now, as we move to individualized strategies, by taking an individualized behavioral approach, we found that Ms. Brown actually had suffered a history of physical assault. and any physical touch would lead to a very adverse response. Okay, she was very averse to touch. Why do I point this out? Because a general strategy, if we had gone by general behavioral strategies that are suggested for reassurance, it includes a light physical touch. But guess what? If we had done that with Ms. Brown, if we had used the generally recommended light physical touch, we would have caused undue trauma because that was enough to provide a traumatic experience for her. So what do we say instead? We used a reassuring, calm voice, no touch. We were able to identify this issue, note it to all staff working with Mrs. Brown that you are actually going to make the situation worse by touching her. So you back off. You only communicate with your voice and with gestures and with your body language, okay? Now, for sake of time, I'm going to keep going, but during the Q&A, I just really wanted to point this out, and during the Q&A, I'm happy to come back to these if we want to go into some more examples of what we could do here. But to make sure that we can get to a Q&A portion, we're going to move on to step 4, okay, which is implementation of the behavior plan, continuous monitoring of that plan, and making changes as needed. So here, I have a sample of what this monitoring sheet could look like. I did not include a copy of this for you all because this is simply an example. This could look so drastically different depending on your individual with dementia, your loved one, whether, what their behavior is, how often they engage in it, are they at home with you, a sole caregiver, are they in a home? It will vary. But what I want you to take away from this is that this is way more simplistic than the ABC journal, okay? This is very, very practical, very, very, very easy, and that's going to be the key, right? Whereas at ABC journal, it's temporary. Here, we want to just be able to track and monitor. Are the changes that we made in that individual behavior plan, are they helping? Are they making it worse? Are they doing nothing? Okay? So here, we have it separated into 3-hour blocks, and then an all-night block here in the columns. Where you see an X indicates if the behavior challenge occurred at any point during that interval, we're just going to throw an X. Okay? Super easy peasy. If there is nothing in that interval, that means that the behavior challenge didn't occur at all during that time. Okay? Very, very simple. Now, what this permits us to do is now we see this dark bold line. This indicates when we started the behavior plan. Oh, so sorry. I touched the screen. My apologies. Should I touch off? I'm so sorry. We almost made it to the end without me making a mistake. Okay. Well, we're going to continue on with what we can see. Oh, can you just click? Oh, geez. All right. Well, we have the printed sheet. Okay, and everyone online can look.
The top left.
So like this?
The
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
There we go. Oh, awesome. Okay, I'm not going to touch the screen anymore. Thank you, Brooke. Okay, so what I want to capture here is we see below that bold line where we started the behavior plan, we see just one interval checked, right? Just one X. Whereas above that bold line, before we implemented that behavior plan, we see checks 2 to 3 intervals a day, right? So what does this tell us? The behavior plan is working. Keep going. It is helping. Look how much less my loved one is frustrated, okay? It's helping. If we started this behavior plan and we see the number of X's haven't changed, maybe they're even worse. Something has gone wrong. We need to go back, reassess, make some changes, okay? Now, of course, we would give it a little bit longer than 3 days, depending on the individual, but as this example, you want to continuously collect data so that we can monitor the efficacy of what we're doing, right? That way we know that what we're doing is in fact helping our loved one with dementia. And it helps for caregivers too, right? You are putting in so much effort. As caregivers, there is so much that is on your shoulders, whether it's for a loved one or in a professional capacity. Don't you want to know if all of your hard work is actually producing something, right? Let me know. It's feedback for yourself to know, like, hey, I'm doing a good job. It's helping. So it's worth me putting in all this investment, all this effort, okay? So it's good feedback for yourself because I know we're inundated with suggestions, right? Someone's telling you, do this, don't do this, try this. So let's figure out what is working, what is not working, and go from there. So, as I said, you may need to go back and reassess. I would expect that when you make a behavior plan, it's not meant to last forever because dementia progresses, right? It's the nature of the disease. And as the disease evolves, our supports and strategies must evolve with it, okay? So I would fully expect that we will need to go back and readjust, make some changes for our loved one to live a happy, good, healthy quality of life. Now, there have been several themes throughout this presentation, but I want to go back and just make sure and highlight a few of them so that we walk away with this fresh in our heads. Number one, they are doing the best they can. It is going to be difficult. I'm sending you detectives out, these ABC journals. I know you're going to be experiencing those behavioral challenges, and in those moments, it is difficult. There's no doubt about that, right? But we need to remind ourselves that they are doing the best they can because they are not giving you a hard time. They are having a hard time, okay? And when we remind ourselves of that, it makes this a little bit easier, okay? They are not giving you a hard time. They are having a hard time. And what can we do to help them get out of it? To that end, it is imperative that you make your calm contagious, okay? No one ever calmed anyone down by being escalated. Or, if you're upset, how many of you have been told to calm down and it works? Okay, that's right. I've seen a lot of right? You need to make your calm contagious and remind yourself that it is not your emergency. You don't get to set off the alarms and flail your arms in the air. It is not your emergency. Meet them where they're at, as you said, okay? That's what it's all about. Don't fester on the skills they once had. Don't fester on where they were before. You need to acknowledge and appreciate where they are now, and that will take you so much further. Meet them where they are. And of course, treat yourself with compassion, with grace, and with kindness always, okay? Everyone here participating today, either in person or online, you're clearly taking a big first step. And for that, I very much commend you. And I want to leave you with one last final thought. It is true that dementia is not curable. But if you leave with anything today, okay, I want you to remember that that does not mean that it is not treatable. And there is, in fact, so much that we can do to preserve and enhance the happiness, the well-being, the autonomy, and the quality of life of our loved ones with dementia. Okay. All right, that is all I have. Thank you all for being here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Anyone in here have any questions? I do serve as a behavioral health consultant, and so of course, what the goal of today was for all of you to be able to walk away with practical strategies to be able to utilize at home or in your residential placements. Now, I also want to add that those ABC journals that y'all are all going home with, and you'll receive electronic copies as well so that y'all can print out additional sheets. That will be helpful for you no matter what care provider you go to. Okay, you're following up with a neurologist, your primary care, geriatrician, whomever it might be. Now you can take objective information okay, to them. You guys, there's so much more information that they have to go off of. So I certainly encourage you to do that across the board with any care partner that you're working with. And of course, I do just as you go to neurology, your PCP, psychiatry, whoever might be involved, I do of course encourage you to find a behavioral health provider as well, right? So that when you do have these issues, if you do exhaust these strategies at home, someone that you can go to help explore these a little bit further. So there is help out there, and yes, you can absolutely. Don't be discouraged.
All right, I have a question from the chat.
Yes.
Logan says, my loved one is fixated on the loss of his guns and the misplacement of his keys because he can no longer drive. It seems no matter what I say or do, his anger and frustration remains or escalates. Do you have any suggestions?
Yes, this is a tough one. First, Logan, I want to say that I'm very happy that you've either removed the firearms or locked them up safely. Absolutely. Number one, you must do this for the safety of everybody. So I commend you on that. Second, a big thing that we have a tendency to do is automatically try to negate what the individual is saying, right? So maybe he's asking for the guns. You know you can't give him the guns, right? So you automatically are trying to rationalize with your loved one. That is not the best approach here, okay? You cannot try to rationalize the fixation like that. Instead, step one, what you should do is you need to meet him where they are, okay? And you are going to validate his feelings, okay? Where are the guns? I want my gun. What's my response gonna be? You want your gun. I hear you, right? Because what? If I am upset and you're trying to pull me out of it, if you are just negating my concern that I'm expressing, my concern that is very real and rational to me, if you try to negate that, well, you simply don't understand, right? You don't understand my concern right now. So of course I have to fight you because you don't understand. I need to convince you that this is a problem. I need to convince you that something is wrong, right? We need collaboration. We need for you to make it so that I know that you're on my team, okay? And what's the first step to doing that? You validate what they're saying. You want your guns. Yes, you're right. I know you want to find them, okay? You need to validate. You need to get them so that they know, oh, all right, they're with me. I don't need to fight you. I know you're on my side. All right, now we're going to figure it out together. We are going to validate and extend, okay? What happens with these fixations is if you try to simply distract, it's not going to work. It might escalate them further, which it sounds like what Logan is experiencing, okay? So after I have validated the feeling, I've shown him that we are on the same team together, I'm now going to try to redirect, not distract, redirect. Meaning I'm going to try and take him with me now, right? We're on the same side and we're going to move together. I know you're interested in the guns. How can I adjust this? Okay. Let's use the example of the key, because I know that's an extremely common one, right? We want to go drive. Once I validated and I got him on the same side as me, okay, we're working together. Where do you want to go? Where should we drive to? Do we have to go to the bank or do we need to go to the grocery store? All right, now you got him answering a question. Okay, grocery store. Okay, what do we need to get from the grocery store? Do we need to get our vegetables? Do we need our produce or do we need our meats? What are we gonna do? Okay, and now, next, okay, maybe we can transition to making a list. If you can't go to the store right now, all right, you know what? Let's do it. Why don't we go hop in the car? Let's go to the store together. Okay, so we're not just trying to distract the fixation. You're redirecting it. You're taking the interest and trying to guide it on a path where you can go. You can't say, here are the keys. Go ahead, have fun, right? But how can you take them so that we're still using the fixation, but guiding it on another path? That's a really great question. Do you have any other questions?
We have one question. Sorry, Brad.
One more?
Yeah. We have one question about, are you aware of any medication that will slow down the process without really bad side effects?
So, there are new drugs that have come out to, to reduce the progression of the disease. And that is could certainly be better well answered through another care provider. I don't want to speak outside, so I don't want to make any inferences there. Now, the key thing think of the goal of that drug. Okay, the goal of the drug being to reduce the speed of the progression of the dementia, right? Now, where we have more concern and where we want to be cautious of using are drugs that are aimed to reduce the behavioral and emotional challenges with the disorder. Okay, antipsychotics being an example of one. So that is a completely different class of drug. And I would absolutely encourage you to speak with your medical provider who could go into much more depth and give you much more information as far as that class of drugs.
We actually have a past presentation. It was done in January by Dr. Owen Carmichael that he talked about just the new Alzheimer's drugs. Again, that was in January. Some stuff has happened since then. But a little spoiler, he is going to be one of the presenters at our education conference coming up in April.
Awesome.
So we'll get an update then.
Yes. So Dr. Carmichael in April, in case the online people couldn't hear. Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm sorry we went oh, perfect timing. Look at that. We did it. Yes.
Well, wow. That, I think, was my favorite ADAPT presentation yet. I hope y'all all enjoyed that. I learned a lot, and I think it was a great new take of a lot of common challenges that we face and things that we talk about quite often in a different lens to look at it through. So everybody on Zoom, this concludes the presentation. Y'all can hop off. I will be emailing the follow-up email within the next hour or two. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Everybody here, make sure you grab a lunch if you haven't yet, and you can fill out your evaluation and make sure to leave that for us. That always helps us make sure we're continuously improving our program. And a little round of applause for Dr. Pizarro.
Thank you. Yes. During this lunch, can I get a lunch?
Absolutely.
Is growling. It's so good.
I know, and the thing is, our whole room is gonna smell like this for
Worth it. I mean, honestly, because usually it's like.
We like the sticky stuff. We like syrup. We like muffaladas.
I should have known that because I feel like it's a Louisiana because sometimes I'm not permitted here, but when I come, it seems like all the food. Yeah, thank you for coming.
Wonderful presentation. I really loved it.
Thank you.
I felt like I was back in college. You can tell you're a professor because you were a great public speaker. I was like, I'm in college again. I was like, I didn't feel too no.
I hope it was helpful. I hope it was. And any questions that come up later, I have my email in the file.
Yeah, it was lovely. The case study was really wonderful.
Good.
On how to connect the dots and everything. So
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yes, I think
I'll get it for you.
Thank you very much.
definitely.
So I'm glad to hear that.